Welcome to Pawpaw's Workshop. One of the things that I had said I was going to do is look around the shop for different jigs and tools that I think would be useful in your shop. Well, today I found one. Now recently I made the table saw sled and it's working out fantastic. But this jig attaches to that sled and allows you to cut very thin strips of wood. And I use these for all types of different projects. But this piece of wood can be cut down to about 1 millimeter or even thinner and be completely safe and be able to do consistent cuts time after time. So let me show you how I did this today. Now, one of the things that I want to point out is I made this sled actually a number of years ago. And when I show it to you in a minute, you can see how the plywood over time has darkened a little bit because it is quite old. Now, this was a prototype that I made, and my intention was to go ahead and make one that looked a whole lot nicer. But here again, this one worked so well, I never went ahead and built the second one. But this one today is the original prototype, and I think you're going to be impressed with it. Now this jig just sits right on the table saw sled, and then you clamp it into position. Now you can slide this left or right to make these thin strips as literally thin as you want. But you can see that this is a very simple design, and I used a shop vacuum to be able to energize this fence, to be able to pull these thin strips right up against the fence itself. To show you how this works, I grabbed just a very odd shaped piece of mahogany, and I'm going to cut this to about 1 millimeter thick, and that's pretty thin. And with the vacuum going, this thin strip actually gets sucked right up to the fence, and it will not move. So as I cut this through, it's perfectly safe because the fingers are not even close to the blade and it's completely enclosed. Once it's done, I can easily slide that back and not worry about my thin strip falling into the blade, as it is stuck well to the fence itself. And there you go. That is a very thin strip. And the nice thing about it is I can duplicate this over and over without having any additional adjustments. As most thin strip type jigs, you have to adjust each and every time. This one you do not. Once you have it set, you can just continue to cut your strips, and that's one of the things I really like about this jig. Now I want to take and show you just how consistent this is. I'm taking my calipers and moving it down this thin strip piece of wood, and you can see that consistently it is 1 millimeter thick. The nice thing about this jig is not large. It's only 12 inches by 18 inches. These strips across the top, these are actually 3 inches. The one down here at the bottom was 2 inches, and they're 3 high. And the only thing that I did is I just made a slot inside. The vacuum cleaner will be able to take care and have this entire tube open to be able to draw the air into it. And as far as the sides, again, this is a total, including the base, 4 pieces of plywood. The top piece of plywood only has the bolts in it, and the rest of them I've just taken and drilled a series of holes all the way along this. Now as far as the bottom, I took the drill and just angled it up to be able to drill the holes and get into the chamber. Now again, this is a prototype, and guys, it's worked well. I've had this now for a number of years. I've actually never went ahead and built a regular one that was all nice and pretty. This has worked fantastic, and I just stopped there. Now this is just a thin piece of plywood. This is the 5 millimeter piece of plywood, but you could use 1/8 inch, You could use the 5mm, you could use any thin sheet of plywood for this, and you just have a slot in it. I used a 1/4 inch wide slot, but you could again use whatever bolts that you have. All I need to do is just loosen this up on both ends, and this will just slide out. Now as you can see, now this is mahogany, but I can cut very, very thin strips. Now this particular piece is 1mm, as I showed you a few moments ago, but you can literally cut down. I have cut down to 1/2 millimeter, and that's as thin as I've been able to cut. This thin piece of plywood that goes on, that's fitted right over these bolts, is designed so that you're not going to be losing the suction. You slide that down over on top of the wood, and these holes then will be able to concentrate the air pressure and hold it right against here without losing the pressure. So this is a really good feature to be able to have on this. You can raise this up to whatever height that you need it, and you're not going to be losing the suction and the ability to hold that piece of thin veneer. Now with this plywood in place, it keeps all the extra holes that are not being used blocked, and that way the thin strip that you're cutting will be sucked right up next to that fence and not allow it to fall back into the blade. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video today, and if you did, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below and the little bell next to it so that you can be notified on the different videos that I do in the shop. But I want to point out something also. Over the years, I have seen many different types of thin strip table saw jigs, but I've never seen one like this that has a vacuum attached into the fence that allows for repeated thin strips being safely cut. Too many times I've seen strips that, quite frankly, I was very nervous and wanted my fingers away from them when I saw the videos, and that's not the case with this type of a setup. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching this video today. And don't forget, take a look at the videos over here so that you can stay up to date in my shop.